Welcome to Lesson 9, where David becomes king and captures Jerusalem. After Saul's death, the men of Judah came to Hebron and anointed David king over the tribe of Judah. Meanwhile, Abner, the commander of Saul's army, made Ishbosheth, son of Saul, king over Israel. War between the house of Saul and the house of David broke out and lasted between 5 and 7 years. David grew stronger and stronger, while the house of Saul grew weaker and weaker. In a fit of anger, King Ishbosheth accused Abner of sleeping with his father's concubine. Enraged by this accusation, Abner vowed to transfer Ishbosheth's throne to David in order to establish David's kingdom over Israel and Judah. Ishbosheth didn't dare say another word to him. Abner sent a message to David. If David will make an agreement with him, Abner will bring Israel to David. David agreed with one demand. He must not come to him unless he brings his wife Michal with him. Abner conferred with the elders of Israel. They wanted David as king, and they agreed it was time. Abner came to David at Hebron, and David prepared a feast for him and his men. During the feast, they planned a covenant between David and all Israel. David agreed and sent Abner away, and he went in peace. When Joab returned from a raid, he learned Abner, his sworn enemy, had come to arrange a covenant with the king. Joab argued with David. In his opinion, Abner came to deceive the king, observe his movements, and find out everything to do to defeat him. But Joab deceived David, not Abner. He sent a message for Abner to return from the well of Sirah. When Abner arrived in Hebron, Joab took him aside in the gateway, as if to speak with him in private. Instead, to avenge the blood of his brother Asahel, Joab stabbed Abner in the stomach, and he died. When David learned this, he said, "I and my kingdom are forever innocent before the Lord concerning the blood of Abner. May his blood fall on the head of Joab and on his entire family." Then David said to Joab and all the people with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn over Abner." King David himself walked behind the bier. They buried Abner in Hebron. The king, along with all the people, wept out loud at Abner's tomb. The king sang a lament for Abner, and he said to his men, "Do you not know that a prince and a great man has fallen this day in Israel? Today I am powerless, even though anointed king. These men, the sons of Zeruiah, are too violent for me. The Lord pay back the one who does wickedly in accordance with his wickedness." After Abner's funeral, two foolish scoundrels murdered Ishbosheth. Full of pride, they brought Ishbosheth's head to David, hoping to gain favor with him. But they were wrong. David had them executed. Then the tribes of Israel came to David at Hebron. Since he had led Saul's military campaigns, and God proclaimed him to be their ruler, the tribes of Israel made a covenant with David. They anointed David as king over all Israel. On David capturing Jerusalem, please note, there are many gaps in the scripture, so rabbis, scholars, and archaeologists have added elements to explain the taking of Jerusalem. After David defeated Goliath, he took his severed head to Jerusalem as a warning. The well-fortified city did not intimidate him. Now that David was king, he chose Jerusalem to be his capital. Situated on a high mount between two valleys, this strategic location provided advance warning of approaching armies. Jerusalem, centrally located between Judah to the south and Israel to the north, was the perfect geographical site for a unified Israel. Under the Jebusite rule, the city scorned Israel's God, and Jerusalem remained the unconquerable city. They boasted to David the blind and the lame had the power to repel his army. Outside on their city's wall hung two statues of blind Isaac and lame Jacob. David despised their mocking as much as he despised their idols. To David, the Jebusites were blasphemous. In the past, when an army approached Jerusalem, the idols jerked and moaned. They scared the soldiers into believing evil spirits protected the city, and they fled. But none of those armies believed in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. How dare the Jebusites mock the covenant partners of the living God? When Israel advanced on Jerusalem, the Jebusites lined the high wall with the blind and the lame to mock them, and they made frightening idols jerk and moan. But David's army ignored them, passed the wall, and chose not to make a frontal attack. The Lord gave them a better plan to capture the city. David said to his soldiers, "Whoever would strike down the Jebusites, let him get up the water shaft to attack the blind and the lame, those whom David hates." David promised the first to strike down a Jebusite will become chief and commander, and Joab was the first. The city's water tunnel provided David with a covert entry. Once inside, they discovered the idols operated by hydraulic power, and they smashed the controls. Then they moved through the tunnel, entered the city, and they conquered Jerusalem. For years, the city had relied on the idols to keep armies away, but no idol can replace the living God. King David settled in Jerusalem, and now the city that once mocked God became a city of his worshippers. As king, David ruled differently. He kept the title king, but understood God was Israel's true king, and he was a prince ruling under God. He had united the tribes of Israel. For years, peace ruled the land, and David became greater and greater, for the Lord was with him. David reigned over all Israel, doing what was just and right for all his people.